Welcome back to Growing Up in Scientology. We have a very special guest today, Mr. Mike Laws. Mike, go ahead and say hi.
Hi, though I don't know that I'm a very special guest.
We are going to have an awesome topic of conversation tonight. And for those of you who don't know, which is probably most of you because he's very quiet about all of this, Mike has probably helped more people in their transition out of the Sea Org and out of Scientology than any other single person out there. So that's why I called Mike a special guest.
Okay. And I don't know, again, I don't know that that's true, but I've tried, you know, I had my own very difficult route out, and better, I thought it was appropriate to try and help some others. And whether or not I did that well is a subject of massive discussion. So.
Well, you know, there's only been a few people like you who have been willing to take people into their homes for extended periods of time and give them jobs and sort of introduce them into real world concepts and try to wean them off of their Scientology bubble concepts. And it's not that everybody leaving Scientology or the Sea Org necessarily needs that kind of help or that much help, but the truth is a lot of them do. And there's only ever been a few people like you who've been willing to do that. And so let's give a little bit of an intro onto well, how we decided to have this conversation. So a few weeks ago, Chris Shelton and I did a video called, I think he called it Landing on Your Feet After Scientology or something like that. And that video was in response to questions that kept coming up from people who had seen Leah Remini's show. And we've got the Facebook group, the supporters of Leah Remini, Scientology in the Aftermath. And on Chris's YouTube channel and my YouTube channel and in the Facebook group, the question would constantly come up, I don't understand how all of these people in the show have landed on their feet. And when I say in the show, because that's who they're seeing, right? That's that they're seeing these people that seem to have nice homes, seem to have established families, and yet they've spent decades in a cult, many without formal education and whatnot. And so this question kept coming up. How are these people landing on their feet? So in Chris Shelton and the video that we did, that's the question we were answering is, how do people land on their feet? It wasn't how don't they, because there's probably many more examples of people that have not than there are people who have. I mean, I think so. That's probably true. There's probably more people that struggle with it than there are people that don't struggle with it. I'm going to read a comment you made yesterday on Facebook. No, but it's fine because, you know, this video has many is going to be valuable for many reasons. And one of them is to demonstrate that people can disagree and be friends, and people can be friends and disagree.
Okay.
And this isn't even a disagreement, but anyway, everyone will see what I'm talking about. Okay, so you put up a comment yesterday. I would like to publicly challenge for both Chris Shelton and Aaron Smith-Levin concerning their joint video on recovering from the Sea Org and making it and building a new life. I consider both of them friends. Both of them have done a lot of great work, but I think they missed the boat on this one, kind of screwing the pooch. Okay, kind of screwing the pooch. Where is it? I lost my fucking train of thought. And you said, why? Plenty of stuff I read I fully support. Plenty I don't agree with. But this video concerned me with comments. It sounded like people had been made comments to you, Mike, directly, that they were bothered by the idea that their struggles must have been untypical and that they must be pretty messed up because they didn't have as easy of a time of it as Chris had or as me, Aaron, had. You say my experience both personally, and, so my experience both personally and in personally working with a bunch of other people is that assimilation into the real world can be tremendously difficult and ungraceful and brutal and heart-wrenching until certain lessons are learned that are surprisingly consistent. And basically you say, so let's do an interview to explore this further. So tell the audience what you meant by that Chris and I had missed the boat and screwed the pooch on that video. What did you mean?
Okay. We got a couple of calls from people who had the idea, wow, I must be really screwed up if I had such a hard time That looks like bourbon you're drinking.
That is rye whiskey.
Okay. Damn. I am definitely underdressed right now. I responded essentially, no, I never saw anything like that personally when I was getting out. Mine was like hell. And, you know, some other dialogue started. And as you know, I also called you on it on the phone before I put the public challenge out. You know, the first thing I kind of want to, this is not a simple subject. I am going to say something in this interview that's going to piss people off. I don't know what it is yet, but I'm sure I'm going to do it. This interview that's going to piss some people off. It's going to happen. So I would rather neither of us try and be too politically correct and just have an open, direct dialogue and, you know, batten down the hatches for afterwards. We can always...
That works for me.
Okay. One of the things that becomes very interesting in discussing this and going through it is nomenclature, the words, the definitions of meanings. You made a comment that there's a network of hundreds of people willing to support. Online, know that by the hundreds of people that helped Tara
Riley,
yeah.
Tara Riley.
Yeah, put her, you know, with money to restart a life. Nobody put themselves in harm's way. I think they got $15,000, $16,000 for her. And for somebody in that position, that's life-changing money. It couldn't easily be done by 1, 2, 3 people. So there was a network there that had hundreds of people, but the people that will really dig in or that have consistently dug in, La Carrière is one of the big names. Mark and Claire Hadley, they've probably done more than I have. They may not have been as organized as I have, but they've been doing it longer and they've done it with more passion. Karen's been doing it as long as I have and probably with as much passion. Janice Grady has all of us put together. I mean, she came out and she did a tremendous amount, but there haven't been a large number that have been able to, you know, fully embrace people, bring them in, financially back them, jobs, that type thing. And at first I started doing it on my own, and then after things didn't go necessarily as well as I wanted to, I started trying to work with Mark and Janice and Karen, and we tried to share experience and share knowledge to figure out what worked and what didn't work. Because all of us, I think, can be proud about some of the stuff we've done, and all of us will have plenty of things that, you know, we talk about and grimace at how badly it went. So, you know, either statement is there's only a few or there's hundreds. They're both true, but in a different context. What I wanted to do just to start is share a little bit about my story.
Yeah, I'd love to hear it.
I was born in a family. I joined the Sea Org when I was 15. When I was 18, I was recruited into the newly forming RTC at the international base under Jesse Prince and Vicky Asnaran and those guys. I had a child in, had another child. My wife became pregnant after the new rules came out that you couldn't have more kids. Miscavige asked me himself if I was taking care of it, and I said, no, sir, we're having the baby. And I was then made in charge of replacing all of the other couples, Sea Org couples that were pregnant, to get them out to small and failing organizations. So I wound up in Dallas. Then marriage not doing well. I wound up having an affair. I reported myself, you know, still fully believing in Scientology, that one had to come clean. The person that I had the affair with denied it. So I was told to take back my confession or else be excommunicated.
Really?
Yeah. And it was, in fact, this went back and forth. I was in Los Angeles under guard, under security check, getting security checked and, you know, real trouble source. And Amy Scobie, who was Watchdog Committee CC at the time, got involved and said, it doesn't make sense that he's lying. Dig in. And they dug in, and it came out that I was correct. Then they told me to go to the RPF, and I told them that I couldn't go to the RPF because I had kids to support. So I got offloaded. And that's kind of how it started. My parents were in Scientology. My sister was in Scientology. I did not want to get declared, so I worked really hard to clean it up. And while I was in the Scientology network, I struggled, but it was a whole lot easier than when I got into the real world. At one point, I was doing minimum wage construction work on the Manor Hotel, and I was making more money than I'd ever made before. I was working so much hours, I was making up to $1,000 a week on minimum wage. But so on my way out, I had people that treated me kindly, and I had people that treated me brutally. But I kind of, you know, progressed through it.
So a moment ago, when you were on my way out. Do you mean on your way out of the Sea Org or on your way out of Scientology?
On my way out of the Sea Org, I was still trying to be a Scientologist.
Right. Okay, I get it.
I had good standing. I was public at Flag. I paid forwarding at Flag. You know, I was never really able to make stable money after coming out of the Sea Org, even in the Scientology community. But it's a lot easier to work with other Scientologists when that's all you knew. I was born in. From my first learning of language and my first socialization, Scientology concepts were an omnipresent part of it. So, you know, and I think that's very typical for second generation. You know, you say, what's you, what's Scientology? You know, it's like being an American. If you're a kid in America, you're different to a kid in Australia or a kid in Germany. The culture has a big impact. And the Scientology culture it's very powerful in that you believe you're involved in the most important thing in the world. So you can't really just cut it off and say, oh, that's Scientology, this is me, this is what I have to learn in the real world. I struggled and went up and down, trying, and in the end I had a run-in with Marty Rathburn at Flag, where he did a handling on me, after which I kind of decided I needed to not be there anymore. And he and I talked about it after he left and when he was still on the outside. And, you know, it was challenging. For quite a while, I couldn't afford a place to live when I was in Los Angeles. I rented a porch that had flywire around it in LA from another Sea Org member who was renting out a big house to other former Sea Org members.
So this is still during the time where you're out of the Sea Org but you're living in the real world, having to make your own way.
Right.
Okay.
And as a general rule, I could do pretty well. Well, I could do okay when I was working with Scientologists. I worked for Sterling Management for a while. You know, and just different things like that. I could do okay. But I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't realize it probably till a decade later, but my education on what work was and what value was and what productivity was not what was expected in the real world. When you're in the Sea Org, you can be busy, you can suck up, you can blow smoke, you can tell stories and make it look like you're accomplishing anything. But it's such an isolated bubble. Unless you're on sales lines, registration, there's no real way to measure it. You know, is somebody stats up? You know what I mean? Everything becomes so subjective and so intertwined. And I don't think, in the end, I wasn't especially productive Scientologist or Sea Org member. You know, I could have fits of production, but I wasn't that good. But in my head, in my mind, when I left, I was a cut above. I was a member of the elite. I was a Scientologist. I had superior intelligence. I had superior life skills. I had, you know what I mean? So when I've talked to a bunch of people and they've had a very similar thing happen, you go out. Mick Wenlock has a great saying, which is, when we're in the Sea Org, we believe we're a superhero. When we're in Scientology, we believe we're a superhero. Then we get into the real world and it doesn't respond to us as the superhero we think we are, or we know we are. And that state, you know anything, you can know you can do anything, you know you're good, but shit doesn't work when you get in the real world. You've got to actually perform. So that's kind of a brick wall, and a lot of people run into that. I ran into that. And until I got entirely out of the Scientology world and didn't have any of my income or work directly involved with Scientologists, I didn't get to learn. You know, for example, I thought I was a great salesman. So I got a job selling credit card machines for a bank. I made 3 sales in 3 months. You know what I mean? That was essentially, I starved. You know, it was a commission-only gig. So if I wanted to sell, I had to learn how to sell. How does the real world sell? You know, I thought I was a great manager. I couldn't manage very well. You know what I mean? These things that I just knew I was superior at, I was worthless at. So I had a pretty long thing. This is make sure it doesn't have my social security number on it so somebody decides to hack me. This is my social security statement.
I'm sure the hackers already have it from Experian. Equifax.
Equifax. I checked. I was not one of the ones that got hacked. 1987, my taxed social security earnings were $475. 1988, it was $75. 1989, it was $0. Those were the first years I was actually out. Now you say, how do you live on that? Well, I was also paying $500 a month child support then. I was borrowing money from friends and family to pay child support and survive. I was not capable of providing for my family. I was not capable of providing for my kids, but I didn't realize I wasn't capable of it. You know, I started feeling like the world was unjust, I wouldn't stop and say, okay, why am I continually in this situation? Why do I keep failing? I had 17 jobs in the 8 years from 87 through 95.
And so during those 8 years, are these years that you're still a Scientologist?
Yes. I'm still a Scientologist.
So this is really an illustration of the struggle that you as a Sea Org member have, leaving the Sea Org where you think you're one of the greatest fucking people in the world.
Right.
You enter the real world. You're still within the structure of Scientology, but you're learning these lessons that shit works a little differently in the real world.
Exactly. And then 90 through 95, 31,000, 28,000, 15,000, 32,000, 27,000, and then I had another 0 income year. You know what I mean? So, you know, and the first 18,000, the first 6,000 of that went to child support, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'd always met it, but I wasn't necessarily on time. So I created my own inability to provide to my ex, and in turn to my kids, and in turn to my family. But, you know, I had the ability to get people to believe in me. And that was a double-edged sword, because I still have that ability, but now I'm more able to fulfill it. But if you can con people into believing in you when you're incompetent, and you're not taking the lessons that's, you know, I was not taking the lessons life was feeding me and saying, shit, I need to stop and learn.
Right.
I would take advice from anyone that would give it. And as you know, Scientologists are experts on everything.
Oh, yes. And they're very generous with their advice.
They're extremely generous with their advice. I was generous with mine. I would give people advice when I was like, you know, technically homeless many times. When I've talked to other people about stuff, like, you know, 2 of my favorite people in the whole world, Mark and Claire Headley. Well, actually, Janice Grady. Actually, you know, there's a whole lot of my most favorite. But Mark and Claire have built a great life and a great family. And people always look at, oh, look at what a success they had. But they really struggled in the early days. You know, they were working multiple jobs. They didn't have any extra money to rub together. They were struggling. They nearly lost everything many times, but they never gave up. They kept learning. And now both of them are extremely competent in their given lines of work. And they've done a lot to help a lot of people. Janice and her sister, Paul and Fernando, they had a hell of a time when they came out. There wasn't a big network like there is now. But they built and they shared. And that's kind of what a lot of people do. Even Karen Della Carriere, you know, she's known as an extremely successful and prosperous art trader. She struggled when she came out. Years to build a solid foundation. When you don't have a network. I mean, she wound up horribly in debt, kind of like I did, in borrowing money to get back in good standing. So, you know, it really isn't that easy. And then let me just bring one other point on it, and then we'll go back around. Most everyone that I know that has gone out has had a really hard time getting and keeping themselves motivated. I myself had a problem with success, not knowing if I actually deserved it. You know, you've got the ups and downs. You really deserve success. And, you know, I battled with all the, you know, the same shit that everyone else does, depressions. And in the end, the single concept that was bigger than my own, let's call it my own handbag of bullshit, was the concept that my kids did not deserve or lose. My children, my boys did not deserve, let me say that again. My boys did not deserve a loser as a dad. I was at that point where, you know, it was kind of becoming evident. Even those that had supported me are like, shit, this is like betting on the dead horse in a horse race, you know. And in the end, that was what I needed. I needed to not have someone say, oh, it's okay. Oh, the problem was that you were in the Sea Org. Oh, the problem was you didn't get an education. They didn't look after you. Those concepts to me were debilitating concepts. What worked for me is you have these responsibilities. You have these children. You need to get your shit together. You need to pull yourself out. You need to do what you can't do and then figure out how to build on that. And how to learn what you don't know that you need to go where you want to go. For me, one of the big things also was I was born and raised in Scientology, which I believe to most people is about helping others. The concept is about helping others. Whether or not it does, conversation for someone else for another day. But we wanted to help others. And the idea of being selfish or money motivated it's a bad thing in the Scientology world. You've got to make money to give to Scientology, but if you make money for yourself and don't give it, that's a bad thing.
That's true.
I had to figure out how to motivate myself by finding something I could do that I believed was good for the world, and figure out how to make money for myself without having attention on it so that I could support my family. And I came up with all these weird little mind games where, you know, a couple of people really trusted in me. One right now, but they gave me money when few other people would. I could get very excited about repaying them for their trust. I could get excited about giving people good jobs. And if I had percentages in place in the background and I didn't pay attention on it, I could actually perform at a higher level. I was never able to perform at a level of what I'm going to build for myself, what I'm going to make. Still have trouble with it today. And I even tried therapy on it. I still have trouble with it. But I've been very, very lucky with a lot of really incredible people that have tried to help me along the way, mentors and that type of thing. But I think for a lot of people, the loss of purpose, the loss of a mission in life, the loss of a purpose of trying to improve the world may be one of the most damaging things about leaving Scientology. You have that mission. Again, we're not talking, is it being accomplished? We're just saying that was what was motivating us. And when we lose that purpose, and if we think that we've wasted our last 20 years, 10 years, our whole life, that's pretty devastating psychologically and emotionally.
Right.
And that's one of the harder things to overcome.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Skills, emotional motivation. Go ahead.
No. I think we're having I just said that what you were saying makes sense. I think we're having some delays on the connection here. So, okay. So when you left, when you wound up in a mortgage broker business with Janice Grady and her and some of her family, correct?
No.
Oh, oh shit, that's Mark Fisher, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're both big white guys. You know, I can understand.
All you white guys look alike. Okay, so I was going to ask, okay, so your situation, well, I was going to ask this, because there's two different concepts of, one of the things that you've alluded to that I forgot to mention in the outset, is that one of the things that prompted this conversation wasn't just the video that Chris and I did, but the fact that I have on the supporters of Leah Remini Facebook page and on the fans of Leah Remini page, I've made a couple posts saying, I want everyone here to know that there is a network of hundreds of people all around the world composed of second generation former Scientologists, former Sea Org members, first generation former Sea Org members, former Scientologists, and non-Scientologists. Hundreds of them standing by, ready and willing to lend a hand and provide the support needed to help people transition as smoothly as possible out of the Sea Org and out of Scientology. And there's been, honestly, some naysayers that have been like, that's not true, that's bullshit. And this subject came up on Facebook yesterday, and somebody wanted to pull you into it by saying, well, let's hear what Mark Fisher has to say. Fuck, sorry, dude. Let's hear what Mike Laws has to say about it, because he's one of the people who's helped the most people. And I felt like the effort was, let me get Mike Laws to come and call bullshit that there aren't a lot of people out there ready and willing to help. And what I want to differentiate here is I'm talking about a network of people who potentially can provide help. Not that there's been hundreds of people helping for the last 5 or 10 years, because there hasn't been. Everything that's happened over the last many decades has culminated finally in an environment where there really are hundreds and hundreds of people, thousands of people, but I'm going to say hundreds just to be conservative, who, whether they were in Scientology or not, are aware that there is this group of people. Sea Org members is who I mean when I say that, who, if they knew there was help out there for them, would be more likely to leave earlier. And even people who aren't in the Sea Org, people who are staff members and Scientologists, that if they knew there was this network of help available, they would be more likely to leave. And so this message, these people are out there. That is the message I've been trying to push.
Well,
but it's different. It's different. I feel like what might have happened is that some people have interpreted this message to mean nobody needs help because everyone's taking care of it already, or something. But go ahead, give me some feedback on everything I've just said.
I don't think you've worded it very well. I would bet, especially with you know, the work of many of the people like Rinda and Leah and you and everyone else, there's probably thousands of people, if not tens of thousands of people, that would be willing to help. One of the things I had to learn was there's a big difference between having willingness and having a problem solved. They're not necessarily the same things. Making them connect is not that easy always. And one of the reasons I don't really like to talk about how many people or anything like that is sometimes it really did not go well. I had people and it was so hostile between us, I would stay at work and sleep on the floor rather than come home. You know what I mean? No good deed goes unpunished. And I have others who have, you know, been lifelong friends and will be lifelong friends. And I've had shit that I've done wrong, and I don't really want to get into that in that way, but there is a weakness in between the people that need help and the people that can and are willing to give help. And connecting those up is an area of weakness. And I think it's something that some brighter minds than mine need to look at. Because I think you are right, there's an abundance of help. I also know the majority of people that need help won't ask for it. They either don't know how, they don't think they can be helped, they don't think they're worthy of help, or they're afraid to ask, they don't know how to ask, or they feel they have to keep a stiff upper lip. I need to show that I'm winning so that Scientology doesn't think that it wins. You know what I mean? I don't want all of my critics, I don't want the people that disconnected from me to know that I've been hurt, that I'm down. So something that's easier now is there's a lot of forums, there's a lot of message boards that allow people to change. The one that I very first got involved with was ex-Scientology Kids. I was on that one anonymously.
Now that was it's a website, right? That's a specific, not a Facebook group, but a website.
Yeah, it was a website with a chat forum, and it was specifically for ex-Scientology kids. I think it's Astra Woodcraft. I can't remember the other two that were involved in it.
Jenna Miscavige-Hill.
Yeah, and there was one other one who was living. She was in China at one point. But I was the oldest ex-Scientology kid on there, so I was kind of like a grandpa. But when I look back at some of the stuff that I wrote, and even though I wrote it anonymously and I tried to throw red herrings to hide my identity, I'm thinking, what an arrogant idiot. I was struggling as I was writing that stuff, but I was trying to put on a different, you know, I still wasn't out of that mindset. There's another one, Australian one, ex-Scientology. Oh shoot, Scientology. The one that's out of Michelle Stillings, out of. It's probably the biggest one, the biggest repository. Scientology Network. But we can.
Oh, ESMB?
ESMB.
Ex-Scientology Message Board is what that stood for, I believe.
Yes, ESMB, Ex-Scientology Message Board. That one is really amazing. It got a little bit rough. You know, people got kind of rough on it, but it's probably the most amazing repository of stories of things people have gone through. That was really useful to me. And at one point, when I first got on a Scientology message board, I managed to piss off Anonymous. And they decided, I don't know who they were, but they decided that I needed to be humbled. And so I got humbled. And I actually learned a lot out of it on dealing on the web. It was one of the more valuable and one of the more painful things that I've been through.
So what, just being trolled or what?
Oh yeah, you know, just, you know, you're called out on everything. Anytime I made any sort of, you know, and there's a Scientological presence to things you say. I'm going to solve your problem. Here, just do this, Aaron. You know how to do it. That's all you need, Aaron. I mean, that's kind of very Scientological. And if you have that in your presence, you're going to get the shit kicked out of you by people that aren't recognize it. And you actually need to have the shit kicked out of you on that, because it's a barrier to coming into real and genuine communication with people. You know, and to learning. If you think you know, you can't learn.
Right. Sure.
Sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, and I've lost track of where I was going.
Let me see. What was the last thing? Shit, I have as well. Oh, well, we were talking about.
Oh, the connecting up the needs and the those that are willing to help. It's not a smooth transition always, but it could be. A couple of times, me and some other people on Scientology message board said, "Hey, listen, we're willing to help those that need help." And other people were also had done it before me, but they could put together people in different cities that could take somebody. But again, how do you organize it, and what do you need? One of the things that I believed was when people came out, the first thing they needed was a break. They just needed no stress, food, sleep, whatever they wanted to do, just they needed a break. And some people, once they got through that, then started motivating themselves. Others, it didn't help at all. I'm sure it helped. Good food, sleep, you know, rest always helps. But you know what I mean. I was going to make a point and I can't remember what.
Well, while you're remembering that point, let me take the opportunity to clarify what it is I am at least proposing this network is geared up to accomplish. And when I say this network, I am talking about a giant group of individuals. I'm not talking about an organization. I am talking about you, Karen, Chris Elston, Chris Shelton, Tony Ortega, Mike Rinder, myself, anyone who's in the fans of Leah Remini group and the supporters of Leah Remini group and other groups. Part of me wonders if people think that when I talk about the network, if they think I'm referring to something I consider myself to be in charge of. I sure hope that's not the impression I've given anybody. Here's the help.
Me.
What?
You're not my leader.
So, here's what I'm seeing in my mind when I say that. I certainly don't mean there's an infrastructure in place to help anyone leaving the Sea Org become fully successful in life and achieving the American dream. No, it's not what I mean. I mean, someone needs a place to stay, they've got it. Someone needs a place to relax for 2 weeks, they've got it. Someone needs to be picked up anywhere, they've got it. Someone needs to get to some place they need to go, they've got it. Someone needs help writing a resume, they've got it. Someone needs a job, they've got someone who can either give them a job or someone who's going to help them until they have a job. I'm talking basic necessities. And the thing is, I'm also talking about 15 to 20,000 people willing to throw a few dollars to help make a situation easier. Money does not solve all problems, but it sure can help you fucking eat. It can sure help you put a roof over your head. What happened with Tara Riley was an amazing example that on the one hand has been used to prove there is no network of help, but on the other hand is what I believe an example of the fact that there is a network of help. So someone got in touch with Tara and found out that she was struggling a bit and people hadn't been in touch with her and she needed help, and they helped her put a GoFundMe page together. And then the GoFundMe page raised over 15 grand in like 3 days. Right. I look at that as an example of the fact that Tara had someone that she could talk to who was able to help her put that page together, and then we'll put it online. And then many people helped tweet that, post that on Facebook and promote it, and even more people donated to it. That to me, that's what I'm talking about. That's the network I'm talking about. I'm not trying to imply that there is nobody in need. No, I'm sure there's lots of people in need. And those people need to know that there's a support system they can lean on. We don't have some magical way of finding everyone out there who's not completely happy and needs help. And that's not the kind of help I would envision this network of even being able to provide. It's that basic necessities. And again, even when I say it, I realize that in my mind, I'm thinking of it in a very limited scope. People who are freshly leaving the Sea Org and freshly leaving Scientology. That is, in my mind, the very limited scope. When I say network available to provide whatever is needed, that's what I'm thinking when I say those words.
Right.
And then I take a beat and I go, but if that network is there to help those people, then this network could potentially help other people who maybe have been out for a few years, but really need some fucking help. Right. And there should be no limit to what help is available and to whom it is available for. There should be no limit on it. There should be no definition. You know, it should be, we've all come together for this common purpose of making it easy for people to leave. And the other thing I've said is, it's very difficult to imagine how current Sea Org members would ever become aware that this help is available. And you and I know that someone leaving the Sea Org is absolutely not usually prepared to walk into the arms of former Scientologists. They still think, for the most part, those people are fucking evil. So it's even a very small percentage of current Sea Org members who would even be potential candidates for this kind of help. But do you agree with me that we are living in a time where such help is available and hundreds of people are willing to step up, even if that just means to throw a few dollars to help handle a situation?
Boy, you're determined to be
I mean, but it's an important message for me. I feel like it's such an important message that I want to really know your thoughts on it. Like, am I full of shit? Like, is there something wrong with what's being communicated?
I know you. Yes, I will bow to the greatness of no.
What?
You're right, but it's not as easy as you're describing. It doesn't work as easily as you're describing.
Well, I didn't say it was easy. I just said we can do this. I mean, when I know, okay, here's an example. Someone, I think in this conversation, someone mentioned, someone who lives in Australia mentioned that there was someone either leaving the Sea Org or leaving Scientology in Australia.
Right.
But of course, they didn't know anybody was in Australia even available to help. But they did know of Karen de la Carrière. So they contacted Karen de la Carrière in California, who was then able to redirect them back to someone in Australia near them. Well, that's an example. That's an example of how a network works. Well,
understand. Yes, Aaron, you're right.
That's not what I want to hear. I'm not just, this isn't like, honestly, I really want to know what your thoughts are on, do we live in a time right now where this is truly possible to do? Easy or not, pretty or not, you know what I mean? This can be done and it's worth doing. Go ahead.
Okay. Have another drink. Yeah, there probably were always this many people willing to help, but they didn't. The cost of communication, the ease of communication didn't exist. The different networks and the different groups that can share. Yeah, there are a lot of people that want to and could help. They don't necessarily always know how to. It's not always connected up very efficiently. But let me put another little story on it. One of the things that I put together was a network of about a dozen professionals or people in the real world who, when I had somebody in, they would help, they would advise, they would mentor. Insurance agent, a banker, a couple of attorneys. Ray Jeffrey has helped some of the folks that have stayed with me and just talked to them about what are their basic human rights. A lot of times when people come out, they don't know what their rights are. They don't know what their rights are as an employee. They don't know that they have to be paid for every hour that they're working for someone else. So, you know, it went from professional through the secretaries at my bank. When they heard what I was doing, they would take one of the women out maybe shopping or show them how to go grocery shopping. Sometimes when people leave, they don't know how to grocery shop. They don't know how to open a bank account. They don't know how to drive. You know what I mean? It's very different. And to meet your point, yes, there are a lot of people that can be accessed easily to help. But what to do is not that easily. One, does the person needing the help know what they need to do? That's, I think, where the problem is. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of people out that are willing to help.
Right.
Something needs to improve.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Something needs to, it's not even improve, something needs to evolve that can help people. You know, basically when we come out, it's almost a mathematical formula. Our health. Are we able to work? Are we able to sleep? Are we mentally sound? What skills do we have? You know, if you're on the RPF, you've probably got a skill of basic construction. Where are we at physically, mentally, job skills wise, socially, basic economics, life skills wise, and to test ourselves in a way that we will believe, that will tell us, hey, we're good here, we're not good here, we've got to learn this if we want to go this direction. But immediate survival is very easy. Any church would help anyone coming out of any church. You know, the real world society, all of my network that helps these people are never in Scientologists, never been involved. They're just, most of them are Christian, and they just want to help. They want to help their fellow man. I'll also get people to go to a whole bunch of different churches, Catholic Church. I've actually become great friends with a Catholic priest through all of this, you know. You're right. There's as many or more people available. People in society were always willing to help. Now there's a greater awareness than there ever has been on the Scientology issue, the ex-Scientologist issue.
Right. You know, one of the biggest differences between, well, my story of how I landed on my feet and Chris's story of how he landed on his feet, one of the biggest differences between stories like that and your experience with the people you've helped leaving is that Chris and I, when we left the SO, had friends and family to rely on. And I think in the cases of the people, for the most part, that you have helped, these are, would I be wrong to say, some of the worst case scenarios because they had literally no one? Is that an accurate statement?
I don't know that it's even worst case scenarios. Most people don't necessarily have anyone. If you haven't talked to your family in 20 years, you may not want to go to your family. You know what I mean? Your family will be willing to accept you back with open arms, but you will not be willing to impose that. And it's, I don't even view it as worst case scenario. I know they're doing well, but they're not actually doing that well because they're either staying in and pretending that they're, pretending to be something that they are other than, I mean, you can get into so much, semantics and twisting of comments. I wouldn't call it the worst of the worst. The worst of the worst are the people that I've never seen who, like, what was his name?
Sergio Walensky?
Yes. There's plenty of kids that wound up in LA, street kids. There's, there are a whole, mine are probably the middle of the road.
Right. No, I'm glad you mentioned that. That's a great point. So I shouldn't have said worst case scenario. I should have said, let's what I want to do is ask you for some examples without naming names of situations. What was the life situation of some of the people who wound up needing the help that you provided, whether they were coming out of the Sea Org or coming out of Scientology? I want people to be able to understand how that went and what the situations were and what kind of help it is that they did need.
One was a family, husband and wife. They had a newborn baby. They were trying to do road sales, and they were living out of motels and people's sofa, and with a newborn baby. And I didn't know either of them, but I said, "You're going to come stay with me." And they're like, "We don't know you, why?" And I just said, "I have more than I need. You're going to come stay with me." And so I got them to come, and they stayed with me for about 6 months. Their little baby learned to take his first steps in my living room, and the mom, the thing she wanted to learn to do more than anything else was cook. And she was a fucking horrible cook. Most of the stuff she cooked was not edible. I'd come home at the end of the day and open the door, and she would, smoke would billow out, and I'd try and smell what she had burned trying to make for dinner.
Was this an ex-Scientology family?
Yeah, ex-Sea Org, both ex-Sea Org.
But they had just like been declared?
One that pregnant, wouldn't get an abortion, kicked out.
Got it. But still in Scientology or not in Scientology?
They were declared when they came. When I got them, I think they were declared as they left, but they were still very much in the mindset of Scientology when they came to me.
Right, okay.
They believed they were Scientologists. They believed Scientology was good, and the Sea Org, well, not even the Sea Org, just David Miscavige was bad. And
so, Mike, how did they even come to be aware that your help was available?
I heard about them, and I heard about their baby, and I tracked them down. I called through the network of people that does exist till I could find someone who knew where they were, and then I got them on the phone, and I said, "You have a baby. You need a stable place to stay. You're going to come stay with me." And, it was awkward, but, there was a fucking baby there. So just kind of get over it. You know what I mean? Pride has nothing to do with this.
So what other kind of help? I'm sorry, sometimes I can't tell if I'm going to cut you off because of our weird lag. What other kinds of help did this family require in order to whatever? I don't know how to say it.
The mom wants, first thing was they just wanted to decompress, and they were really good people, and they really tried to be good guests and help. I got her first job. She was a waitress on the ship. So I contacted a friend of mine that had one of the nicest restaurants in Beaumont, and I said, "Listen, I got a big favor. Will you take this lady on as a waitress and train her?" And brought her on, and she was a wonderful waitress. She serviced, didn't push her personality. I mean, she was a wonderful waitress, but she wouldn't ask for money, and she didn't know anything about alcohol. So the restaurant owner actually had to have somebody go with her to the table to explain about wine or drinks, because it was impossible for her to comprehend initially. You know what I mean? She couldn't get it. But she had, so she had to learn to drive, didn't know how to drive. She had to learn how to grocery shop, had to learn how to budget. He got him some work, he made some money, he helped get there, was working on trying to put their family together. And let's see what, you know, they you don't necessarily realize how much skill you have in life to do something, from opening bank accounts to planning out a month, getting enough credit in to rent a house, or, you know, open a credit card or something like that. So basically it was all of that. He was a little more advanced in that he didn't go into the Sea Org until he was in his early 20s.
So he already had some real world.
He had some real world experience, but it was in a different country.
Right.
You know, the family's still grown. They've got more kids now. They're doing well. But one of the funny things is, and this goes back to the Sea Org superhero, and I give them both shit about this. So if they hear this, they won't be upset. She used to mercilessly criticize him for the fact that within a few years he wasn't a millionaire yet. Because if he was all of this when he was in the Sea Org, and he was all of this, he should instantly be able to become a millionaire. So there wasn't even a concept of her for many years afterward on what is required to achieve financial success. You know what I mean? It should be able to happen like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of an overly embellished example, but it was very real to them. And you can also focus it on yourself. Why can't I make things happen? Yeah, that's one. They were here for about 6 months, 7 months.
And so in that situation, with that particular family,
right,
what's the point at which they're able to, I guess the word I want to use is a launch, right? Like they've come to you for help. You've helped in many different ways. What is it that's required to sort of turn the corner and for that family and move on to the next step? Was it being able to save up enough money?
Well, for him, it was trying to get his family unit stable enough and then go back home so that his family could pick him up. 6 months wasn't really enough time for them to become financially stable enough. They had debts, they had credit card debts, and, you know, little things like that. But just a nice thing. My son was looking for a car when they were leaving. So they wouldn't take money for their car. They sold it to him for $100 just as a thanks. My son was a college student. You know what I mean? So they were exceptionally kind, and they were generous in the way they could be. I mean, it was an old car. It was nothing flash, but I was paying for my kid's courses. He had to pay for his living expenses. You know what I mean? That was the deal that we had.
Right.
So it was very much appreciated by him, and it was a beautiful gesture. They were stable enough that they could relocate to another country and not be, you know, and basically work with his family. They were trying to get themselves out of debt. They were, you know, they were physically healthy. So what is the launching point? And that's a really good question, and I don't know that I'd have to think about it, because I don't think what I did is necessarily a good model for, you know, to have other people do. I think
because it's too much of a commitment, or for what reason?
It's too much of a commitment, and it doesn't. The things that have really worked is mentoring, not just myself, but other people. I've actually had people cry when people, like, for example, an attorney or a banker or, you know, a priest or a minister would sit down with them and spend a weekend talking to them. Like I've had people cry saying, I didn't think I was worth that person's time. So, you know, you've got a health issue, you've got self-esteem issues, you've got, you know, it's not that simple. And also it can become really overwhelming if you have someone in your house for months, and especially if there's problems. And if I see something that's different than what they see or they want to do, yet they're entirely dependent upon me, it's not a very, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They feel like they owe me, yet I'm trying to tell them something that's not what they want to do or believe. You know what I mean? It becomes very, very contentious. Janice Grady had an idea of getting a house, or, you know, a small farm or something like that, where people came and, you know, they did something, they contributed, they earned their keep with whatever they could do, and, you know, got the rest, got the education, got to read the books. You know, I built my house like a hotel. I've got something like 4 hotel rooms with balconies on the second story of the house. So people could come in, and if they wanted to lock themselves in the room for a week, they could come down and eat. They had their own bathrooms, and, you know, they could watch TV and read books. I got a book with a couple of thousand, library with a couple of thousand books. That's hard for someone to, you know, either they feel they're entitled to it, which is not healthy for them, or they feel uncomfortable being given it, which is not good for them. So having something that's more interactive, where they're helping look after themselves and other people are looking after themselves and other people, and there's people that are willing to come in and help and educate. And I think therapy is an important part. And those things are kind of put together in more of a little community. I think it's difficult to bring it into your home for prolonged periods of time. I don't think that's necessarily a good way of doing it. Somebody needs food, somebody needs shelter, no question.
Right.
And almost anyone would. But making that long a commitment, I think, can be difficult.
Right. And so maybe I'm being too optimistic about it or whatever, but the fact that in the absence of funds, in the absence of easily available funds, it does require someone to be willing to do what you have historically done, which is welcome someone into your home for months. And that's why I felt that having 15, 20, 30,000 people who have cared enough about Leah's show to go search out, find, and join a Facebook group to support the show. Having that many people available who are willing to throw a few bucks at anyone who needs help transitioning out is alone a huge step forward from where I have to assume we were 5, 10, 15 years ago. Because like you said, having someone into your home might not be a great solution for either party. But if there's some easily available funds, then that's not necessary. Or, you know what I mean? Does that sound right?
Yes and no. And I think it has to be more. One of the things I've learned is throwing money at somebody doesn't help. That's
for sure. I mean, it helps up to a point, and then it sort of stalls, right?
Well, but even money doesn't solve problems. It can make symptoms go away. But if you don't know how to if you don't know how to manage money, you get 5 grand, you get 10 grand, you get 15 grand. You know, from what I understand, Tara
Riley,
yeah, has been very smart and picked up some people as mentors that to help her manage through it, because you know she traditionally has had issues managing things like that. So she's pretty smart in that she doesn't want to fall back into her old habits. She wants to use that to completely change her life. So that's a smart move. Some people wouldn't do that. Some people have taken the money that has been given to them and blown it. And I know Scientology raised somebody and he blew it on drugs. You know, so better off, I think, would be some sort of a more formal, and I'm sure there's other non-profits, and maybe there's another non-profit that could be allied with, rather than building a new one from scratch, where if somebody comes out, they'll take them in and will provide money to help them get clothed and educated. And they'll probably need, you know, a car and whatever medical treatment they need. So, you know, I think you're being overly optimistic in saying, hey, this guy comes out, if we give him 5 grand, he's going to be on his way. I think it's more fundamental than that.
Yeah. Well, sure. And I definitely didn't mean to imply that that would put him on his way. But it would be an alternative to having to be in someone's home for several months. And he'd still have to, such a person would still, as you're saying, need some kind of mentorship.
Right.
But they could have their own apartment rented for them for 6 months or 12 months, depending on how much money was available. So
but if that apartment had to be rented, they wouldn't be able to go out and rent an apartment.
Right, right.
I mean, there's one of, I'm going to sidetrack to a story and then share something that someone else was doing. One of the things that I had to do for myself in my recovery process was I had to look at everything I was scared of from my education in world in life. So, you know, I was scared of therapists, psychiatrists. So I went and met some and talked to some. The most evil person in the world was Ursula Caberta, who was in charge of the task force in Germany for getting Scientology under control. So when I was in Germany visiting some family, I asked somebody to set up a meeting. I walked into her office and you know, I just wanted to say hi. You know, I wanted to meet you mainly because I was told for my entire life that you're the most evil person in the world, and so I wanted to meet myself. And she laughed, and you know, yeah, I realized I had to. You know, I'm going through a government building where I have to hand in my passport in a foreign country, and then I've got armed security people bringing me through security to go meet this person.
And of course, in Scientology, you're like, Germany is the home of the Sykes. Which I don't even think is true. Right?
Probably is, but so you get in her office, and there's walls and walls of Scientology material.
In Ursula's office?
Yeah. Every Scientology book in every language she had in her office. And she had read every one of them in English and German.
Jesus Christ.
So she could sit down with anyone, but she brought a lot of people back. And we actually became friends. I mean, we talk a couple of times a month. And we've stayed friends. But, you know, she set up a network. Somebody at Flag was thrown out of the FSO. The German consulate would get an air ticket for them, fly them back to Germany. She would meet them at the airport, bring them to a hotel, an apartment, a small apartment furnished by the state of Hamburg, the city of Hamburg. You know, make sure they had some money for food, for some living expenses, should get them whatever counseling they needed, should get them whatever education they needed, and then all the way through getting a job. And this was a government-backed program that she ran.
I didn't even know that.
No, it's incredible. And she helped other people in other countries, and you know, she would go with people to their family, ex-Scientologists and ex-Sea Org, to their family to help mend that gap.
Really? So the person that had been in Scientology forever and the family they'd been ignoring for decades?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, the family, the hostility is much stronger there. So if you went into Scientology, your family would probably disown you.
Oh, I got it. Right.
So she would actually meet them. She would call them. She would visit them. She'd put them back together. I mean, she was a powerful politician, a powerful government figure. She was an exceptional human being when it came to helping people rebuild their life.
Wow.
There were dozens and dozens of people she helped like that. Very well respected. But that is a type of program that I think is necessary. And one of the things that I really think we should consider is not just looking at Scientology or ex-Scientologists in isolation. A lot of people that may come out of other religious groups, even you have a woman, let's say in her 40s or 50s, who was married to a man for 30, 40 years, helped build his career. He then trades her in for a Botox Barbie.
Right.
Her situation is not exactly dissimilar.
No, you're right.
So,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. No. Go ahead.
Well, it makes so much sense to actually just say that there's an organization that could provide this help. It doesn't make sense to set up an organization that just helps former Scientologists coming out. To be honest, there aren't enough of them. There aren't enough of them coming out who are also in need of the help. And here's what I mean. A lot of people, because they don't know there's a network to fall back on, that when they leave the Sea Org, they're still in Scientology. They're not looking to receive the kind of help we're talking about, right? Because we're talking about non-Scientologists providing this help and former Scientologists providing this help. People who are leaving the Sea Org but staying in Scientology, they might struggle in the real world, but they're going to struggle within the framework of being a Scientologist. They're not willing to receive the kind of help we're talking about. So we're really talking about someone that's leaving the Sea Org and is like declared and has no friends or family to fall back on. That's a very small number of people. It makes much more sense to have an organization that provides that kind of help, but to a broad range of people. But then the thought I have immediately after saying that is there has to already be organizations that exist that do things like that. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to start a new organization. I think you've already said that earlier in this conversation, actually.
Right. I mean, if we can create an alliance, a strategic alliance to somebody who's better at it, more organized at it, has more history, has better resources in place, and support and enhance that organization while educating them on the specific nuances of people coming out of Scientology.
Right. So that all being said, you know, as you've been talking, something occurred to me. That maybe there's a certain amount of bravado that it sounds like I'm being way too optimistic in what it sounds like I think we can do and where we can do it. But here's why. And I think this is what occurred to me while you were talking. As a part of when I left the Sea Org, I was still in Scientology for many, many years. And I was able to take advantage of that large Scientology network that existed. Everyone I had known from Philadelphia and Flag and Los Angeles. I mean, it was literally thousands and thousands of people. On my Facebook page, I had like 3,500 people. And when I started working for Kurt Feshbach doing investment research, I leveraged that network of people on Facebook to do the most absurd, crazy research projects in any fucking city and country you can imagine. I'm mentioning that because I guess the fact that I already know I can leverage my own contacts to get almost anything done anywhere, that when I see that there's now about 20,000 people that have stepped up on social media, most of which have asked the question, what can I do to help? That between a handful of people, and I don't care whether that's me, you, Karen Dale Carrier, Chris Elston, between the 5 or 6 people, anyone could call us or message us that someone needs help. And when I see help, I mean urgent help. And we can get them that help. And that's all I ever fucking meant. because the truth is, because what you're talking about, it makes so much sense to me now that what you're talking about is a completely different thing and provides a completely different kind of help than what I've at least have been thinking of when I've uttered the words, a network available to help people leaving. I can see how what I've been saying has been hitting up against this idea of like, yeah, there's no fucking network. No, there's no 100 Mike Laws out there. No, there's not. So I'm talking about acute help. And you're right. But let's talk for a second realistically how what this might look like.
Think about this.
Yeah.
This is how much it's changed. Somebody could call me 300 miles from here and say, I need help. I can now pull up my phone. Oh, Uber, go pick this person up and bring him to me.
That's true.
That didn't exist before. Somebody had to drive out. And if you didn't know anyone in that city, you had to figure out, okay, can I drive there? Or what other city can I get somebody? You know what I mean? It's
totally,
yeah.
Totally. So, so look, just
one thing before I forget it, I don't want to come across that I'm being negative on helping. You know, I have and will continue to help, as will everyone else that's done it, whether or not they've been burned. But one of the biggest pieces of advice I will personally try and follow, and I would recommend for anyone else, is don't try and do it on your own. Try and bring other people in that help. You know, if you're a decent business person, say work in business. If you're a great family person, I can show them the basics of family, but I need to get some other people to help. Because you don't want to burn yourself out and you don't want to burn them out. You don't want to create awkward scenarios. And then find some way that they can feel like they're earning their keep and they're not being put into an awkward situation where, you know what I mean? Try and keep things balanced where people are, you know, feel like they're, you know, like everyone wants to contribute to somebody that's helping them. Right. You know what I mean? A good employer wants to look after his employees beyond the paycheck. You know what I mean? So, you know, don't realize it's not likely to be a couple of days. If somebody needs a couple of days to transition, very easy. Somebody needs a few weeks to transition. But if they're trying to build a life, involve some other people. And try and, you know, make sure that, you know, I think I've said enough.
No, it makes sense. You know, what would be awesome is if we can ask people to jump down in the comments section below and give some suggestions and ideas and thoughts on this subject of current nonprofits that specialize in providing the kind of help that you can tell we're talking about when it comes to not just helping someone get a plane ticket from LA to New Zealand, but helping someone actually figure out how to make their way forward in life. Any current nonprofits that specialize in that kind of help who might be appropriate to I don't know, either consult with them on how to provide that kind of help to Scientologists, or consult with them on maybe creating a sister organization that specializes in former Scientologists. There's this organization, Mike, have you seen this new documentary called One of Us about the ultra-Orthodox Jewish population in New York City?
No.
So there's 300,000 ultra-Orthodox Jews, the Hasidim,
Yeah.
in New York City, and there's an organization called Footsteps that specifically exists to help former members of that organization, that group, make their way in the real world. But the reason that's different is there's 300,000 of these people in New York City. There's only 25 to 50,000 Scientologists in the entire world. There is a regional problem, a regional barrier in creating an organization that specializes in helping Scientologists leaving the fold. It's a big problem. And so if there is some kind of a national nonprofit that provides this kind of help, I certainly don't know of one. I don't claim to have done the research though either. So if any of you have and you have some ideas, please jump into the comment section and let us know, because maybe this is the best way to productively move forward, is figure out how to do this in an organized fashion. I know there's been chatter on starting up a new group. I know that I have a particular concern that any new group that gets formed for that purpose is going to be infiltrated and attacked hugely by Scientology. I've seen the counter argument to that, which is they just can't get away with doing that anymore. I disagree. In the case of the example that we're talking about here, I think that would be worthy of their efforts. So I don't know. I feel like I talked myself out.
Okay. And again, I prefer to look at the problem as more of a on more of a global basis. I prefer to look at it more specifically as people rather than just Scientology. There's a lot of people that are hurting in the world. There's a lot of people that need help. One of the things, and you're right, we need to do something to make sure that people need a basic level of survival and support, triage, an emergency room. Beyond that, right now, my thought is probably the best thing that could be done is a library, an online library of short videos, 5, 10, 20 minutes, that are kind of mentorship type videos, little things, but not an interview, unless it's somebody who's kind of a lunatic like me that will really talk about shit that they don't know how to do. Most people are too embarrassed to ask them. So how do you go on a date? How do you ask a girl on a date, for example?
Oh, you don't want to do that video. I'm giving you a hard time. But like that could just be a YouTube channel. It could be a YouTube.
Yeah, and it should be a YouTube channel, but there's a lot of people that want to know things that are too embarrassed to say they don't know what it is.
Swipe right, swipe left, swipe right, swipe left.
You know, how do you pick a doctor? How do you pick a, you know what I mean? Just little things that everyone thinks they should know that they don't know. You know what I mean? It just, and there could be a whole library put together of just the basics.
No, that would be great. That would be awesome.
But I'd love to get involved in that project, and it's purely educational. You know, how do you figure out if somebody's a good person or a bad person to get in a conversation with within the first 30 seconds? You know, anyway.
I think the idea makes sense. Doing interviews like this is so fun and so helpful. You could always, every time I do an interview with someone, I'm like, yeah, we should just do this all the time. Just figure out shit we want to talk about and talk about it.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to say on this? Anything else worth saying, needs saying?
I think we've bored the shit out of a lot of people too long right now, but
I think you'd be surprised. All right, well, you're down in Houston. How are things in Houston?
I'm actually in the Beaumont-Port Arthur area, and it's getting better. It's going to take years to fix up, to get everything back to normal. But my house is livable. My business is operating. We took 3 feet of water through the business, so it's going to take us a while to get everything right. But all of our, you know, we're operational. We're just kind of limping a little bit, and 3 of my staff lost their homes, and we've helped them get their homes back to a livable state. So we're all good. We haven't lost anyone. And, you know, we're just doing what we can to help each other.
That's great. That's great. Well, one of these days we'll meet in person instead of just on the telephone. And otherwise, fantastic talk, man. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
And thanks for talking. And, you know, I was kind of half kidding and half serious in the, you know, screw the pooch thing, but.
I know. People don't know when they see that shit that we're friends.
Okay.
All right, man. Have a wonderful night. Talk to you soon.
Cool. Bye.
Bye.